Day 2. Room has been in flux most of the day. Found I still have internet access and my Steam library, but can only access Half-Life related games and mods. Figures, Z-Man probably didn't want me replaying Mass Effect while trying to get these reviews done. Room finally stopped fluxing and I decided to risk a trip outside for food and supplies. Decided against venturing outside until room fluxes somewhere else. Okay, back to work. Welcome back to Late Reviews, where we're in the middle of talking about the Half-Life series, and as promised, we're going to look at the multiplayer and mod scene. When Half-Life first came out, multiplayer first-person shooters were already a rapidly growing trend. id Software had pretty much perfected the deathmatch formula with the Quake series, and helped invent the modern concept of a LAN party, alongside StarCraft, of course. As such, it was an unwritten law that any shooter made in that era had to have a multiplayer mode of some kind, and most of them were just tacked on deathmatches and they sucked. Half-Life was no different, and it just didn't have much to offer. Apart from some of the more unique weapons like the Snarks, Detpacks, and Trip Mines, it was far from original. Heck, even Jedi Knight back in 1997 was more creative. I mean, sure it looked like ass, but at least it had force powers and lightsaber fights. Thankfully, Valve was already working on improving their multiplayer. About 6 months after Half-Life's debut, a patch was released adding a free add-on multiplayer game called Team Fortress Classic. A unique twist on the old red team versus blue team capture the flag style of gameplay, players joined one of two teams and picked a special character class, each with their own unique weapons and abilities. The medic could heal teammates or poison enemies, the sniper was devastating at long-range accuracy, the engineer could build automated sentry turrets to protect vital areas, and the spy could disguise as the enemy team and sneak past defenses. This was huge for online multiplayer. It was different, it was simple enough to learn and play, and for a time it was the most popular online game out there. TFC was the first example of two very defining traits for Valve Software and its success among gamers. Firstly, a continual tweaking and improving of their existing products. TFC was a free addition to a wildly popular game. Valve could have easily charged for it, but chose not to and even continued to patch and make improvements to both TFC and Half-Life as far as 2003, almost 5 years after the game's original release. Though there was a standalone version sold for those who wanted to play TFC without buying Half-Life. Secondly, a dedication to their fanbase and a support for user-made content and mods. Team Fortress actually started its life as a Quake mod, but Valve hired the team to remake it for Half-Life, refining it, polishing it, and renaming it Team Fortress Classic. I should probably explain what I mean when I say the word mod, since I tend to use that word a lot in this show and the rest of this episode. Mod is short for modification, and in this case refers to user-made content for a video game, usually involving custom levels, characters, enemies, weapons, sounds, and so on. Of course, I don't mean to imply Half-Life was the only game that did this. Making custom levels has been around since the very first PC game, and Quake 1 and 2 had a very active modding community. Heck, I got my start writing reviews of user-made maps for Star Wars Jedi Knight. But that was all independently done by the users, playing around with the game code and creating their own tools and programs. Again, what Valve did differently was it embraced the user community and worked with them to build free extra content for the game. They released a software developers kit, which was basically a stripped-down version of the tools they used to make the original game, and encouraged the community to create their own levels and mods. They even sponsored contests with prizes for the most unique mod makers out there. Besides fostering the consumer loyalty Valve is known for today, promoting the modding community also gave Valve a chance to scout for new talent and even buy up some of the more promising projects. For instance, I'm sure most of you have heard of a little thing called Counter-Strike. This multi-title online shooter started its life as a humble user-made mod. The appeal is fairly straightforward. CS is an update on the cops and robbers style of gameplay, only with terrorists. Depending on the map, the terrorists need to blow up a target or the cops need to rescue hostages from a terrorist base. Though most of the time it ended with whichever team killed everyone else first. Another big draw was the realistic for the time guns and damage system. Take just a few hits and you die, having to wait it out in spectator mode until the next round. This thing was so insanely popular when it first launched that Valve ended up hiring most of the developers and sold it as its own standalone title. It was also one of the first things sold on the Steam Digital Distribution Store when it first launched, obviously a bestseller. This was to shooters 10 years ago what Modern Warfare is to consoles today. I was working at a LAN arcade when this game hit its peak, and you would not believe how popular this thing was. Counter-Strike was on every system, and it was all anyone played. Maybe there was somebody playing Unreal Tournament or Team Fortress Classic if you got lucky, but at any given time, if you had someone between the ages of 12 and 25 in there, they were playing Counter-Strike. Back on topic, there is more custom content and mods out there than I could ever hope to play and review for Half-Life itself, but I thought I'd make a small attempt by going over a few. All these are free to play if you own a copy of Half-Life, and are pretty easy to find. One of my favorite sources is moddb.com, and Steam lists a few free mods on the game's store page. Now, disclaimer time, I'm mostly going to be sticking to my own personal favorites for this list, so if I don't mention something that you personally like, please do not be offended. Feel free to leave a comment or start a discussion on what your own favorite mods are. I'm also sticking to multiplayer stuff for this list because, with the exception of 2 or 3 single-player mods, I really didn't find any that were very memorable. Again, if you want me to check something out, feel free to send me your suggestions and I'll see if I can't do a follow-up video in the future. Also, as these are multiplayer mods, they tend to be a little underpopulated as the community has moved on in the last decade. With the exception of Counter-Strike, maybe. And if you play them online, chances are you'll come across a server that makes you download a bunch of custom maps, sounds, and decals because people love to customize their servers back in the day. Wow, I've just made this sound so appealing, haven't I? Alright, with that out of the way, here are a few of my favorites in no particular order. What would you get if you took the original Half-Life and Opposing Force, added a co-op mode, and threw in a bunch of custom weapon and monster skins, then ramped the difficulty up to 11? You'd probably get Sven Co-op. This is probably the largest Half-Life mod out there, thanks to all the new custom content in it. Sven allows you to play through the original game with a bunch of your friends or total strangers, and use weapons from the main game and the expansion, but with stronger and more plentiful enemies, a scoreboard, and a respawn system. There are also some new custom maps made for the mod which require teamwork in order to succeed, from defending an area from attacks to just forcing a door open. This is a good example of what mods can do. It builds on existing elements from Half-Life, adds new functionality, and adds a lot of custom stuff for flavor. If you found your single-player experience in Half-Life lacking, give this one a try. You're all gonna die screaming. Who doesn't love a good zombie shooter? Sure, the market has become oversaturated with them with some help from Valve Software, but before studios started making whole games about zombie killing, we had to make do with community mods to put zombies into our favorite games. Brain Bread was one of the better zombie multiplayer games just for its simplicity. You and your teammates are stuck in a map with NPC zombies milling around looking for tasty brains, and you have to fight your way through them. Depending on the map, you have to complete a series of objectives, slowly moving through the map until you can make it to rescue. Again, sound familiar? This one's on my list both for its simple elegance and cleverness. The maps increase in difficulty depending on the number of players, so it can adapt if people join or drop out, and can even be played single player, at great difficulty of course. Human players who get killed by zombies end up coming back as zombies themselves, and can return to the human side if they maul enough NPC soldiers. Or their friends. So if you suddenly find a friend gnawing on you, try not to get mad. I also love the subtle stat reward system and the weapon variety, including your standard assault rifles, Uzis, miniguns, and even... Like the other mods in this video, this one's a bit rough around the edges. The zombies are really samey, the AI is pretty bad most of the time, only a handful of levels are any good, and sometimes the hit detection is off thanks to internet lag. But if you want to kill zombies in an old school shooter with some friends, this one's not bad. This one's more of a personal favorite for me than a classic. It's a fun twist on the classic red team, blue team capture the flag style gameplay and the concept of corporate warfare. The players are security officers / human resource managers for 2 rival corporations, each with their own team of NPC scientists who perform research throughout the match, earning your company money and unlocking new weapons and abilities. If you want to increase the odds of victory, you'll want to infiltrate the enemy company and destroy valuable assets or recruit the other team's scientists. And by recruit, I mean bash them over the head, throw them over your shoulder, and then take them back to your base. Alternatively, you could just kill them, costing the enemy team research and money, but there's a clever mechanic in the game where your research team can get distracted by things like nearby fighting or news that their colleagues at another company have been murdered. That's why I like this game. It's got so many little clever facets and changes. My favorite way to cripple the enemy team, though, is by researching the portable radio, then planting it in the enemy research lab as it plays loud, annoying music.
Every day I'm shuffling.
Sadly, it's the player base that impairs this mod. Unless you're working as a team, you can get creamed. The drawback to the research system is that it's a little too complex, and new players will have no idea what research unlocks what bonuses, which can leave your team underpowered and outgunned. There was a newer version in the works for Half-Life 2, but the team behind it broke up in 2008, so sadly this is the only version out there. Still, if you can get enough of your friends to give it a try, I recommend it. Ever wonder what would happen if you merged StarCraft and a first-person shooter? That was cancelled, that doesn't count. Well, if shooters and Alien RTS gameplay had a baby, it might look something like Natural Selection. This one might seem a little simple at first. Two teams, aliens and marines, try to wipe each other out by destroying the enemy team's base. What makes Natural Selection stand out is the complex strategy element. Both teams can gather resources and spend them on improving their bases and themselves. Aliens can upgrade their abilities or evolve into totally different life forms like the Fade or the Lurk, while Marines buy new armor, guns, and turrets. Teamwork is key in this game. The Marine team needs a player to sit in the command chair, allowing them to drop supplies and buildings to expand the base and increase the team's firepower, while the aliens need Gorges to build upgrade attack and resource towers to defend their hives. This can all be a bit daunting to new players, and it's all too easy for a team to get steamrolled by a more coordinated enemy. But Natural Selection can be a great experience. The official levels are dark and atmospheric, and the aliens' unique gameplay style is reminiscent of the Alien vs. Predator games, with Skulks able to climb walls and get the drop on unwary humans. If the strategy element is a bit too much for you, you can play in combat mode, which is similar but resources are accrued automatically, so you can focus less on building and more on investing in your personal upgrades. If you can get into it, you will have fun, and you'll learn why a Marine shouting "Onos" can bring shivers down your spine. So those are just a few of the mods that are still out there for the first Half-Life, and hopefully I showed you something that interested you. I did mention earlier that there aren't a lot of memorable single-player mods out there, but there are a couple of big exceptions, and they're big enough that I want to devote an entire episode to it later. But for now, I'm gonna go see if it's safe to leave yet. Oh god, walnuts!
That's why I'm looking for the next best thing. Looking for the next best thing. I appreciate the best, but I'm settling for less. So I'm looking for the next best thing.
Gentlemen,